It's week 2 of rankings, and today we have the shooting guards, maybe the toughest list yet. I think no doubt the toughest list yet. Plenty of controversy here on today's video, so stay tuned for that. But if you missed the point guards, go check out last Tuesday's video, as every single week we're going to be going through a new position, giving you our top 10 as well as some honorable mentions. So if that interests you, please support us down below, as we're eventually going to cap off this stretch with a top 10 overall players going into next week. But we're on the road to 500 subs, so please help us get to that next big milestone. We can't get there without you guys, and we're not going to stop grinding here over at the Anomaly Podcast. But before we get into that, we do have to go through the criteria that I have here for these rankings, as well as some honorable mentions. But after the top 10 rankings, if you stick to that point, timestamps will always be in the description. But we're going to go through some of the latest NBA news around the league, as well as some important information for the channel going forward. So as always, again, timestamps will be in the description, but let me know if you guys have the time. Please check out the end of the video. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's talk about this criteria. Alright, the criteria is pretty simple. You see it on your screen. The positions were based off of Basketball Reference, so I had to have a base, and Basketball Reference was my place to go. Obviously, we're going to be looking at these players' overall skill and arsenal as of late, the last 2 to 3 years of this player. Their health and availability as of late, the last 2 to 3 years again, their recent team success, their situation, their individual stats, their moments. Basically everything here for these players in the last 2 to 3 years. But the biggest part of my criteria was what have we seen as of late, right? What is the latest thing we've seen? And a little part of it was the last 2 to 3 years, their playoff success, all that good stuff. But without further ado, we're going to get into some honorable mentions, as I'm going through all of these 5 positions, and it feels like the top 8 of these lists are all set in stone. It's just a matter of placement, right? But for the last 2 spots, it's really tough. You know, the point guards was really tough to find out a 9 and 10. The shooting guards was even tougher, finding out a 9 and 10. And to be honest with you guys, I can wake up tomorrow and view this all completely differently. But it comes down to criteria and personal preference. And at the end of the day, as of right now, I have my 9 and 10 the way it is. You guys will have to see here in just a moment. But our honorable mentions, right? We're going to start here with Desmond Bane, a guy who was right there. I think tomorrow, if I wake up, he might make my top 10 shooting guards list, right? But this is a guy that just got paid. He's one of the best shooting guards in the league, one of the best shooting wings in the league, I'll put it that way. And he's also a very underrated defender. You know, he was one of the hardest leaves off of this list, like I mentioned. But again, I could wake up tomorrow and Desmond Bane is on a top 10 shooting guards list for me. And then OG Anunoby, he's the other guy that it was really in conversation to, is he a top 10 shooting guard? Do I want to put him on this list? But I left him out just for now because he still is an all-NBA defender, right? And he does give you 17 points a night. It was just a personal preference, again, right? As I really took into account kind of everything, and OG just barely missed the list. And everybody else, Jalen Green, Tyler Hero, CJ McCollum, Josh Giddey, Austin Reeves, Jordan Poole, and Anthony Simons. All of these guys they're really creative with the ball. They can all go out there and create their own shot, create shots for others. And on a nightly basis, on any given night, they can go out there and give you 30 points and win your team the game, right? So I think these are all guys that are very close to making the list. And again, you see how much talent is on this list alone, right? For the honorable mentions. The shooting guard position is stacked here in the NBA, and it was very tough formulating the last 2 spots on the list. But we're going to get into it, right? At my number 10 spot, we're going to go with Tyrese Maxey, or as Basketball Reference would say, Mad Maxey, which I've never heard before until I looked at the nicknames there on Basketball Reference. It's most likely a name. Has been his nickname for years and years. I just don't really remember hearing it in the games that I've watched for the Philadelphia 76ers. Regardless, last year was a career year for Tyrese Maxey, almost across the board statistically and off the eye test. He just looked like a completely different player from years past. He was a lot more comfortable, he's a lot more aggressive, and he was a lot more productive here for the Philadelphia 76ers. He's basically in a role where his shots and opportunities at times are never guaranteed. He's essentially fighting for the third most shots or opportunity on this team every night with a guy like Tobias Harris. But this is a guy that still averaged 20 points per game, right, in the limited role at certain times. He just fits perfectly with the Philadelphia 76ers team. I mean, with how he plays, also with the city, just because of how hard he plays, how hard he works, and how hard he's worked to improve his game each and every year in his NBA career. And to me, if James Harden does eventually get traded, if he does eventually move on this offseason, I believe Tyrese Maxey is a guy that could make that jump from 20 points per game to 25 to 26 points per game and maybe be in the All-Star conversations. As crazy as that might sound, but I really believe in Tyrese Maxey and his scoring ability, right? Defense, it's a little bit more to be desired, but a lot of that can be scrapped up due to his size, right, on the defensive side of the ball. But he's super talented. He's a super young guard in this league, and it might be a crazy take to have him over guys like OG or Desmond Bane. But I'm going to live with it. I love watching Tyrese Maxey play as a guy that really this year, he really opened my eyes, right? As far as compared to other years, I wasn't the biggest fan. I didn't really see the vision that others saw, but I definitely see it now. Tyrese Maxey is a top 10 shooting guard for me as of right now. And my number 9 spot, we're going to go with DeJounte Murray. And again, this might come as a surprise, but it's just personal preference as I watch him. And I get it. I completely understand if this is a crazy pick to you. But I really think the second half of last year is the reason I still put DeJounte Murray as a top 10 shooting guard. This was his first year in Atlanta. Hey, if you look at his averages, they were down across the board last season. Coming over from the Spurs where he had all the opportunity, no one was taking the ball out of his hands. He comes to an Atlanta team that's trying to win a championship, and he has to share the ball with one of the best young guards here we have in the league in Trae Young. He still had one of his best offensive seasons, right? Especially in the mid-range area. I had to do some deep dive for these statistics, but DeJounte Murray shot 51% on his mid-ranges this year, and that was far and away his best of his career, right? He also extended his range to the three-point line a lot more this season, a lot more than he has in the past, which is good. You want to see more aggressiveness from a guy like DeJounte Murray, as he was shooting about 5 3-pointers a game. That's also a career high. But a lot of that happened because Quinn Snyder took over late in the season and told DeJounte, you need to go out there and be more aggressive. Don't be afraid to take the 3-point shot. And we're going to live with that shot, right? Even though that's not a specialty. I mean, this is a guy that was able to keep the Atlanta Hawks afloat. I mean, people forget that, when this team was struggling early on in the year, it was DeJounte Murray who really picked this team up around the midseason mark. And really, kind of when Trae Young was off the floor, he was really the guy that got them over and won them certain games. And he had those 20, 30-point performances with great defense and got the Hawks over the top, right? Even though they only finished 500, those wins in the middle of the season, if DeJounte Murray wasn't giving them to the Atlanta Hawks, they wouldn't have made the play-in, right? Or they would have made the play-in and had to fight a lot harder than they did in that first game against the Miami Heat. But DeJounte Murray, no doubt, right? He still had his ups and downs on offense last year, which, that's expected, to me at least, because he was coming over from a new situation, completely different role, and he's still an elite two-way player, though. Yeah, right? He still gives you all NBA defense with 20-plus points a night, with playmaking ability, and just team leadership, right? That's one of the biggest things that people always say about DeJounte Murray. But to me, just over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen him be the guy on the team with the San Antonio Spurs. He's coming over to the Hawks, and sure, he took a back seat. But like I said, he's still giving you all NBA defense, 20 a night, with playmaking ability. This is a guy that was a borderline all-star on a mid-tier team. Again, didn't have the best year. This could be a hot take to have him even over Tyrese Maxey, let alone Desmond Bane, OG Anunoby, and all those other guys. But I'm going to stick with DeJounte Murray for now, right? That might be a crazy pick, but stick with me. My number 8 spot, we're going to talk about a 4-time champion, maybe the second greatest shooter to ever walk this planet. We're going to talk about Mr. Klay Thompson, throw those 4s up as he's at the 8th spot, not the 4th spot. Regardless, after 2 devastating knee injuries and just an overall setback in his game, rightfully so, due to those injuries, there's no way that Klay Thompson was going to miss this list for me, as last year, he still made 300-plus three-pointers, which led the entire league, and that's coming off of 2 devastating knee injuries, let's not forget. And not to mention, on those 300 threes, he shot 41% on 10 attempts a game. That is unheard of. Nobody does that on that volume, and that was the 4th highest in the league as well as far as percentage-wise. But his scoring was the key to keeping this team afloat when Curry went down, not once, but twice, throughout that regular season. I think people forget that Curry had those injuries, and even though this team struggled on the road, Klay Thompson was the reason that this team kept winning at home, and they were the reason that this team was eventually a 6 seed here when Curry came back. But Klay Thompson, to me, is still an above-average backcourt defender. He's not the defender he once was, but he's still an above-average backcourt defender, and he's no doubt, the second greatest shooter to ever lace him up. I would just like to see at this point in his career to try and round out his game some more, right? To crash the boards, make the extra pass, because at this point in his career, with his athletic ability taking a step back, if his shot is not falling, he's just not being that productive on the court. And we saw that in the Lakers series. It was like the Lakers were kind of daring him to, take those crazy shots to get in his own head and kind of lose the series for the Golden State Warriors. But even with that said, he's still top 10 shooting guard for me. And unless he falls off of a major cliff next season, he's going to be here next year too. No doubt in my mind. And moving over to my number 7 spot, we're going to talk about one of the most underrated scorers and overall players here in the NBA, in Zach LaVine of the Chicago Bulls, as he's coming off of a season where he averaged 25 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 4 assists on great shooting splits, almost 50, 40, 85, right? And his stats after the All-Star break, which is something we don't really look at, but his stats after the All-Star break only back the argument I made prior to the season, as I believe the offense should run through Zach LaVine, having DeMar as a secondary scorer, as a secondary option rather, and it's not a 1A, 1B offense. It's a Zach LaVine offense partnered with Nikola Vucevic and DeMar DeRozan. But, he averaged 27 and 5 on the second half of the year on increased shooting splits, almost 50, 40, 90. And for the advanced stats, guys, that stretch for Zach LaVine's career was the second highest effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage of his career the second half of last year. It's going to be an interesting season in Chicago for sure, as I believe this is a team that this might be the last year of their current core. And if that is true, I believe Zach LaVine, he has the most value, and he'll be the first one gone out of that core there in Chicago. As I can't wait to see him go to a different position, a different situation rather, with more opportunity, with more control, and more shot attempts, right? As he doesn't have to share an offense. If he goes to a team where his role is just score the ball, I think Zach LaVine can really take another step up. But to me, he's no doubt a top 7 shooting guard in the league, and I wouldn't be mad if you have him over the next guy on this list, which we're going to transition to now, and it's the newest Phoenix Sun, Bradley Beal. And we're going to start with his last year in Washington, which was his 11th season in the league, and his final one there in Washington, as he averaged 23 points, 4 rebounds, 5.5 assists on really good shooting splits. He's another guy who, due to his situation, has been super underrated throughout his career. And let's not forget that over the last 4 years, he had a 2-year stretch where he averaged 30 plus points a game twice for an entire season. This is one of the most elite scorers in the league. And again, because he plays in Washington, he is super underrated. He had a very good career in Washington, I'll say that. Maybe one of the best they ever had in that franchise. And he was also a part of those really fun mid-2010s teams that were always they always made some noise there in the playoffs. But he was traded this offseason, and we've talked about that extensively here on the channel. That trade, and it had 10 total picks, and it was crazy. But the quick rundown is this. I believe the Suns unit next year, it will be at its absolute best if Bradley Beal can embrace the sniper role and only at times put the ball on the floor and create for himself. As Bradley Beal is one of the best shooters we have in the league, and after all, there's a chance we might see a flame under Bradley Beal in a new situation, and we might see the best overall ball of his career, right? We might see the best overall version of Bradley Beal this year. But not to mention, this is going to be the easiest the game has ever been for Bradley Beal, due to how much attention that his other 2 co-stars will get every single night, as Devin Booker and Kevin Durant command so much attention in that mid-range area. And most nights, Bradley Beal, as one of the best scorers in the league, is going to get the 3rd best defender from opposing teams. And that's not to diminish Bradley Beal. That's not to say he's a bad player, but you're playing with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. A lot of pressure is going to be off of Bradley Beal this year. And even with that said, Bradley Beal doesn't need to be the ball handler in this offense. I believe he could still play the 2 guard. I believe he just needs to move and make shots, right? And I think that's really how it will work best here in Washington, is he can really space the floor for Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, let them do what they do in the mid-range area, and just do what you need to do for this team, for this offense, right? Make your shots, move around, and I think he might even outscore one of Devin Booker or Kevin Durant due to how much open looks that he has this year. But I think the key for this team to work is Bradley Beal, and the sacrifices he's willing to make at the end of the day. He's going to be the Chris Bosh or the Kevin Love of this group. And super excited for Bradley Beal, right? And I wouldn't be mad if you had Zach LaVine over him. These guys are kind of 6A, 6B in my mind. But Bradley Beal at my number 6 spot for right now going into next season if I had to pick one, right? And my top 5 is going to kick off with a very young man, right? A guy that has impressed me in every single year of his career. And no doubt, he's a top 5 shooting guard for me. We're going to talk about Anthony Edwards, a guy who also recently got paid for a 5-year, $260 million deal. Shout out to Ant. That is generational money, and he's pretty much going to be getting all of it. I think 200 of it is guaranteed, so shout out to Anthony Edwards. But he's improved in each of his first 3 years in the NBA after being selected number 1 overall in 2020, I believe. And if he wasn't the clear-cut guy for you after 2022, last year, he kind of proved that he is the guy for the Minnesota franchise. Going forward, he will be their cornerstone. Move aside Karl-Anthony Towns. There's a new sheriff in town, and that is Anthony Edwards. But he finished the regular season with averages of 24.5 a game, with 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal and a half a game, right? On good shooting splits, with okay defense. And not to mention, he was an Iron Man for this Minnesota offense, or just Minnesota team, right? As he started 79 of the 82 games. What more can you ask from a third-year player, right? Not much more from Anthony Edwards. But he was also amazing during the playoff series against the eventual champion Denver Nuggets, as they were gentlemen swept, right? They did lose in 5 games, but in that series, he was averaging 32 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, with 2 blocks and 2 steals at the guard position. You cannot ask for much more from Anthony Edwards, as back-to-back years he has impressed me a lot in the playoffs. And again, even though they only took 1 game off the champs and they were gentlemen swept, there was other teams in the playoffs that couldn't beat the Denver Nuggets, a team that has LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and that Lakers team. They couldn't take a game off. So, Ant did it single-handedly by himself. That just goes to the talent of Anthony Edwards. He has a bright future, and he's most likely going to have even bigger expectations next year after this contract and just moving forward, right? As he's going to be the guy for this franchise moving forward. But how efficiently can this front office be around that fact, right? If they're going to put all this pressure on Ant, how efficiently can they build a team around him, right? And how quickly can they do that? As Ant, he's going to be their guy going forward. Do you keep Ant? Do you keep Cat, rather? Or do you keep Rudy Gobert, right? These are questions you got to ask yourself as Ant is your guy. How quickly can you build around him and get him to the point where he can succeed at the highest level? My number 4 spot, we're going to go from a young man at number 5 to an old man here at number 4 with Paul George at full health. He's one of the smoothest, most talented guys that we've ever seen at his position in the NBA history, right? And that's saying a lot, but that's also the problem, as Paul George, again, last year missed the final 8 games of the regular season, as well as the entirety of the first round series for the Clippers against the Phoenix Suns, which they eventually lost. But I had this team as my favorite coming out of the West last year, right, prior to the season. And it just, it looked good. I'll say that, actually. It did look good at, to a certain point, but their stars got hurt yet again. And due to the Clippers being eliminated in the first round, though, however, Paul George did say on his podcast recently that this offseason he's taken a different approach, as in the past he's kind of rushed back as soon as possible and then got comfortable after, his injury healed. But this year he said he's going to take a slow approach, a less aggressive approach here in his rehab process. So maybe he can be ready for the long haul for the Clippers next season. But he is now 33 years old, right? And he's heading into his third year of his 4-year extension with the Los Angeles Clippers. It's going to be a big year here for the Clippers. Paul George did just average 24 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, with a steal and a half a game as a number 2 option. At the end of the day, Paul George is still an elite 2-way player. He's still going to be in the All-NBA discussions for the next couple years, which means he's a top 15 player in the world. I just believe with how impatient Steve Ballmer is, the owner of this franchise, that since the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George core hasn't even been able to make the finals, let alone win it, he might get impatient and might want to blow this core up or make a slight change in getting rid of one of the two. And I believe Paul George might be the odd man out. So it would be interesting to see next year if he was with New York or another franchise, well, what he might be able to do. But regardless of that, Paul George is still Paul George, still the All-NBA level of player. And at least for now, he's still going to be a top 4 shooting guard for me. Maybe next year, if Ant takes a step up, he's number 4. Or maybe Paul George comes out next year and proves me wrong, and he's still the number 1 shooting guard in the league. That is quite literally a possibility. But to me, the top 3 guys just provide a little bit more availability, and that's the only reason I have some of these guys above them. Moving over to number 3, and I think this is going to cause some controversy, but look, as a Cavs fan, I'm okay with having the hometown guy a little bit lower than maybe where he should be, right? Just to make everybody happy. But I remember watching this dude, Donovan Mitchell, right? And that's my number 3. I remember watching him at Louisville and just being amazed, he was older in college, right? But just being like, man, this dude's going to be a star at the next level. And I also thought at the time, as a delusional Cavs fan, I was like, we can grab this guy at the end of the first round, and he'd be an amazing fit next to LeBron after Kyrie left, because he left that same offseason. But little did I know at the time, Donovan Mitchell, years later, would eventually be a Cav, but unfortunately without LeBron James. Regardless, as a Cavs fan, it's awesome knowing that we just witnessed the best year of this young man's career, and it may only get better in the future, as Donovan Mitchell is now going to be an All-NBA level player year in and year out, and last year, he was an All-NBA player. He led the Cavs to their first 50-win year and playoff appearance without LeBron James in over 20 seasons. That alone deserves some flowers, and that alone deserves the top 3 spots. However, he did struggle in the playoffs, right, when we met up against the New York Knicks, and he only shot about 43% from the field, but it just left a sour taste in my mouth, and maybe that's the reason I have him at 3 instead of 2 or 1. But again, he is a Cavs player, and there's no doubt that heading into his 6th year, I believe he can put that Knicks series behind him, and I believe he's going to prepare for another playoff run with this young Cavs core, with Darius Garland getting better, with Evan Mobley getting better. Hopefully, Jarrett Allen, the lights aren't too bright for him next year, and this core 4 could put it all together next year. And to me, personally, I believe this Cavs team will finish as top 3 in the East and have another All-NBA year for Donovan Mitchell. And to me, maybe I'm too ambitious about this year, but I am a Cavs fan, and to me, Donovan Mitchell is a top 3 shooting guard going into next season, just off of what he's done the last couple years, but especially as of last year, as he was kind of gave new light to this Cavs organization. My number 2 spot is going to be Jaylen Brown. I know, how do you put 2 people over a Cavs guard that could very well be number 1 on this list? Well, I just explained it, right? It is simply because I prefer these top 2 guys, and I'm okay with having the hometown guy a little lower than maybe what he should be. But Jaylen Brown is a guy who, in his 7 years in the league, he has made the playoffs every single time, and he has been elite in the playoffs every single time. I mean, the only year he missed the playoffs was in 2021, and that's only because he tore a ligament in his left wrist. He missed the majority of those playoffs. But since Jaylen Brown was drafted, only 10 players have scored more playoff points, and all of those guys are going to be heading to the Basketball Hall of Fame. And only 3 players in that span have appeared in more games. Jaylen Brown, I mean, this is a guy that is a winner, and he's going to an organization that loves to win. But Jaylen Brown has been a perfect fit here in Boston. But this is a guy that just a year ago in the Celtics finals run scored more points than anyone in the fourth quarter, and he had a higher effective field goal percentage than any player in the last 25 years who took over 60 shots. This is a guy who also went on to be the best overall player on his team in the NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors, and that's a team with Jason Tatum on the roster, right? And I bring all of that up because if he didn't have a subpar Eastern Conference Finals against the Heat this past year, where he couldn't dribble with his left hand, I think we would still be having the argument on who is the better player on the Celtics, right? Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. And I believe Jaylen Brown's name would be in a lot more discussions as far as elite players in the league. I think that last playoff series just left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths. But this is still an all-NBA level player that's going to be doing, he might only get better, is my point, as he just averaged 27-7 on great efficiency with all-NBA defense as a number 2 option. I mean, you cannot ask for much more from your number 2 guy for this organization, for the Boston Celtics. I believe one bad series, isn't going to change my mind on the level of talent and player that Jaylen Brown is. And if it wasn't for my love for the number 1 guy, Jaylen Brown, I think, on any other day would be the number one guy, number one shooting guard in the league, and that's over Donovan Mitchell, right? That's over Paul George, Anthony Edwards, and everybody else on the list. Jaylen Brown is that special. I believe he's going to be that guy for the next 10 to 15 years. Like, he's going to be how we talked about Klay Thompson in his prime. As, man, can you imagine him on his own team? He would really take his game to a next level. I can't imagine what that next level would be if he's already averaging all NBA numbers. Jaylen Brown, to me, top 2 shooting guard. And again, he could easily be the number one guy. But then Kyrie Irving is my number one guy. Another guy who just got paid fully guaranteed money. So shout out to Kyrie Irving. I mean, Cavs legend, Boston legend for a year, right? Sorry, Boston fans. But there was questions on where Kyrie was going to play next year, as he was traded to Dallas at the midseason mark from Brooklyn, and he was up for free agency. Was he going to join LeBron? Was he going to go join Jimmy Butler in Miami? But he decided to run it back with Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks after the disappointing end to their season last year. It's no doubt, to me, the best backcourt in the league as far as talent, but can they put it all together? That is going to be the question here in Dallas next year. Regardless, this is maybe the most talented player that the NBA has ever seen, and that is saying a lot. That's including Jordan, Kobe, LeBron. This guy might be the most talented offensive player we have ever seen in the game of basketball. Now, Kyrie Irving, he has had his off-the-court issues. We all know that over the last few years, but that has no part on this list today, and he's still a top-tier guard when available, right? He's still an all-NBA guard when he is on the court. He started off the year amazing with the Nets, right? He started off the year better than Kevin Durant last year. And, as we know, at the midseason mark, he was later traded, as well as KD, to different teams. And in his final 20 games of the year with the Dallas Mavericks, he would average 27 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists a game. This might be a hot take, right, to the average eye, because he doesn't have the availability or the playoff success as the guys behind him even, right? But to me, I think just his overall talent puts him over Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, Paul George. It's kind of, indisputable to me. But if you just watch Kyrie Irving play, I'm telling you, if you don't watch basketball, watch Kyrie Irving play and tell me you aren't interested in the sport, right? Again, this could be that, he was a Cavs player for years and years. He had the biggest shot in NBA history and won my franchise a title. That could very well be it. It could be that, again, I just love Kyrie Irving. He's my favorite point guard of all time. That could very well be it. But to me, I do miss him in the Cavs jersey, by the way. But he is going to be my number one shooting guard for going into next year, as I believe just his overall talent is just better than the resume so far of Jaylen Brown and Donovan Mitchell over the last 2 years. Could be a hot take again, but I'm going to go with Kyrie Irving. But moving on to the top 10 shooting guards recap, we started with Tyrese Maxey, DeJounte Murray, Klay Thompson, Zach LaVine, and Bradley Beal. That was my 10 through 6. My top 5 with Anthony Edwards, Paul George, Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, and Kyrie Irving. Again, if these players are right next to each other, like Tyrese Maxey or Murray, or Kyrie or Jaylen Brown, they can be interchangeable in certain cases, right? So I'm not going to be mad at you, if you go to the comments and say Donovan Mitchell's number one. I wouldn't be mad at you, right? I'm a Cavs fan. But again, now if you have Klay Thompson as your number one shooting guard still, that's a debate that we can have in the comments. But regardless, you guys see the top 10 shooting guards. And now let's move over to just the recent news here in the NBA, as we're going to start here with the Pacers, as they have emerged as a serious contender, per reports, to acquire Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors. Pascal's entering the last year of his contract, and reports have say that he's becoming more and more available around the league, as the Atlanta Hawks are another team that have been, they've shown a lot of interest in Pascal, while other teams also could emerge around the league. But Pascal, he's said on multiple occasions he wants to remain a Toronto Raptor for his career. But to me, with the departure of Fred VanVleet, it's believed the team might want to give all the minutes to OG Anunoby and Scotty Barnes. So that kind of leaves Pascal Siakam as an all NBA player, as the odd man out, which is kind of crazy. But a quote here that says, "The Raptors are indeed more prepared to surrender Siakam than initially realized," per Mark Stein. It's going to be interesting, right? And to me, I have the Pacers, right? I have them as a playoff team this year, as a top 6 seed in the East. And if Siakam is traded there, that only solidifies my argument and my prediction for the Pacers this upcoming year. Multiple teams have been interested in trading at least one first-round pick for Tyler Hero to the Miami Heat, or I believe that would go to the Portland Trail Blazers in that case. But Tyler Hero, he would need to be in the deal to get Damian Lillard to Miami. We know Damian Lillard wants to be in Miami, and the only way that can happen is if Tyler Hero is dealt off the bench of Miami. But Portland, they don't want Tyler Hero in return for Damian Lillard. So that means that they're going to need a third team involved, and it's likely going to be Tyler Hero to another team. But in this case, per reports, that a first-round pick that would be traded for Tyler Hero would go straight to the Portland Trail Blazers because the Miami Heat don't have 4 first-round picks to give to the Portland Trail Blazers. So that kind of got everywhere, right? Hopefully you understood where I was going with that. But basically, Tyler Hero is going to be traded for a first-round pick, but not to Portland. Basically, that's the argument. Joel Embiid, per reports at the Summer League, he hopes that James Harden and his mindset can be changed, and he wants to stay with the 76ers for at least one more year. But over the weekend, Rachel Nichols, a very talented reporter, we'll say it that way, but she caught up with Joel Embiid and she asked him about Harden and him possibly leaving this offseason. And in short, right, there's a big quote, but in short, Joel Embiid was disappointed. But at the same time, he understood it was business. He understood that James Harden needs to make the best decision for him in his career moving forward. But he at the end of the day, he said he was just happy to be Harden's friend for the long haul, and obviously he would like him to come back. So that's pretty cool to hear from Joel Embiid. He's a big man. You don't really hear that softness from the big man nowadays. But to me, it's a big year in Philly. If James Harden does get traded, like I mentioned earlier with Tyrese Maxey, it's a big year in Philly. If Joel Embiid doesn't get a secondary star after James Harden's traded, does he grow frustrated? Does he want his own way out of Philadelphia? Those are going to be something to keep an eye on. But the Sixers, in other news, also matched the 3-year, $23 million offer sheet from the Jazz for center Paul Reed. Paul Reed's only 24 years old or so, showed tons of promise last year, and he's going to be a great big for this 76ers team off the bench for years to come. Maybe the next coming of Montrezl Harrell for you Sixers fans. But Victor Wembanyama, he's going to be out for the remainder of the Summer League after 2 games. He had one good game, one bad game, and that second game he played, he shot like 70% from the field, had 20 points, 8 rebounds, a couple blocks. He did everything on the court for the San Antonio Spurs, and I think in that game we really saw the potential that Victor can be here in the NBA, as it's crazy to see him shoot like a shot on one side of the basket, and before that shot hits the rim, he's already on the other side of the basket, with his length to grab the rebound and go straight back up. It's absolutely insane. But to me, I think the world and the Spurs, we all kind of saw everything we needed to see in those 2 games. And there's no need, there's no need to risk injury. Let Victor get healthy and let him prepare for what matters actually, and that is the NBA regular season. Patty Mills, he has been traded yet again. This is a couple days ago now, but I wanted to bring it to the show. But 3 times in the past week, Patty Mills has been traded, and he's now on his 4th team in the past week. That's got to be an NBA record. But the Atlanta Hawks traded 3 players and a second-round pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Patty Mills, and that's going to give them a much-needed backup point guard behind DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. Right, that means that they don't have to always stagger the minutes between those 2 star guards. They have Patty Mills, who's a formidable backup guard. He's a veteran, right, a champion, and he can go over there and play some solid minutes for Atlanta. But Oklahoma City, they now have 35 draft picks, right, over the next 7 years, and 15 of those 35 are now first-round picks. Oklahoma, if they didn't already have a hodgepodge, right, if they didn't already have so much clutter there as far as minutes there. They have a lot of players that aren't getting the minutes they maybe deserve on an NBA team, but I think it adds for competition, and why not have the option to have the additional draft picks moving forward. And the Los Angeles Lakers, reports say they're interested in Christian Wood and Bismack Biyombo. I would love to see Christian Wood in LA, but again, I don't know if he can handle the lights of LA, so I would still like to see Christian Wood go to maybe like a Charlotte and have Bismack come to LA. That could be a solid pickup, as at the end of the day, Bismack got paid because of one good game against LeBron James. Chris Paul, he hasn't discussed his role with the Warriors with Steve Kerr yet. We know whether if he's going to be a starter coming off of the bench, we know what his possible role on the team would be. but rightfully so. I mean, it's still early in the offseason. The Warriors, I mean, they're a very talented team, right? They're a very decorated team, at least with this core. And, I'm sure because they're getting older, they don't want to rush into things, right? They want to take their time and get to it here after the Summer League. But regardless, the Cavaliers, I mentioned them earlier, but they intend to keep the core four together. And, there were slight rumors whether Darius Garland was going to be traded or available, or Jared Allen was going to be on the move. But the Cavs intend to keep the core four together. And like I mentioned, I expect this Cavs team to win 50-plus games again. I expect them to be a top 3 seed in the East. And I just need Jared Allen to not have the lights being too bright here in the NBA postseason. The Pelicans president, he is frustrated with the lack of the team's progress with how talented it is. And the team has made Zion available for the right offer. They've made Brandon Ingram available for the right offer. And they are also expected to trade Kyra Lewis, which he's a third-year guard out of Alabama, I believe. But the Pelicans are starting to get a little desperate there. And that's going to be interesting to see if they move on from someone too quickly. John Wall, he's been getting private workouts. I mean, a Hall of Famer, right? And, legendary guard for the Washington Wizards. And he's still only 32 years old. I believe his image was ruined by the contract he had. And he's still going to be a very valuable piece off the bench for any contending team, in my opinion. It'll be interesting to see if John Wall will be one of those veterans that gets phased out of the league, or if he can come back and actually get another deal right here to finish his career. Coach Popovich, he gets a 5-year extension with the Spurs worth $80 million at 74 years old. That is insane money at 74. But again, he's going to be 79 when this contract is done if he coaches the entirety of it. However, reports say that no matter if he coaches 1 year, 1 month, 2 weeks, anytime he retires, if he retires right now, he's going to get all $80 million guaranteed. So good for Pop. I mean, one of the legendary coaches in this game, and maybe the greatest coach of all time, right? He's going to get $80 million added to his bank account, so shout out to him. The last 2 things here. The Mavs are expected to trade Tim Hardaway Jr. at some point this offseason, and even though his contract is bad, right, I think he only has 1 or 2 years left. And this is surprising to me because he provides exactly what Kyrie and Luka need. He provides that elite spacing, that elite three-point shooting next to Kyrie and Luka. And sure, they did bring in Seth Curry, right? But why not have both guys on the court, right? You can have Tim Hardaway Jr. on the court for 25 minutes. You can have Seth Curry on the court for the rest of the minutes, right? You don't have to play them at the same time, but you can always have an elite three-point shooter out on the court with that core. I expect him to be back in Dallas. I think this is a bluff, and unless the team overpays for Tim Hardaway, I think he'll be back in a Mavericks uniform. The last bit of news here. Amen Thompson, the 4th overall pick to the Houston Rockets, in his summer league game, he suffered a grade 2 ankle sprain, and he's going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks. No doubt he's going to be ready for the season. No worries there. But it is going to be a safe play here from the Houston Rockets. Very smart move, right, in my opinion. But the couple games that he did play, I think he showed a lot of promise, and maybe he had the most impressive stretch of games from the top 4 picks here in the NBA draft. But Amen Thompson showed a lot of promise, and I think he's going to be the Houston Rockets guard going forward. But that is going to do it for the news, as I just have a quick announcement before we get out of here. As Thursday's show, as you guys know I mentioned last week, will be the 5th ever fan-led show here on the channel. So if you guys are interested, please, drop the questions, right? As you see on your screen now, you can get at us anywhere, right? On Threads, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, anywhere you can get a hold of us. Shoot us a question or a hot take, and we're going to bring it here to the show, right? There's no doubt in my mind. And also, the last bit of news here before we get out of here, as if you can edit YouTube videos, right? If you're interested in gaining another job, right, or working for another channel, we are always there, right? The Anomaly Podcast, if you'd be interested for editing for the podcast, just get at us. Again, on the same 4 apps, get a hold of us, as we're looking to take our videos to the next level. And a big way to do that is to have a visual a component to it, rather. And if you'd like to, work with me, we could talk about prices, all that good stuff. And I think it would be a really good fit moving forward. So if you can edit YouTube videos, get at us, right? As we're trying to take everything to the next level. You also get a shout out every video. But that's going to do it for today's show. As again, we went through the top 10 shooting guards. Next week we're going to have the small forwards, power forwards, etc. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel. Drop a like. All that good stuff. We're on the road to the next big milestone. and we can't get there without you guys, of course. But that's going to do it for today's show. We'll see you guys tomorrow for a new fun game that I'm introducing here on the channel. I don't believe it's ever been done here on YouTube, so stay tuned for that as far as fantasy football, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Stay happy, stay healthy. We're out.